These words come from nowhere, or they don't come from somewhere. This type of speaking, this type of engagement with you is not, it's not from a paradigm. It's not from an understanding. It's not from a series of awakenings or insights. These words have no past. They appear. That's it. Similarly, you'll never find a past. You'll never find anything but a thought about a past. So what is the implication if nothing is following you into this moment? If nothing is delivering you to this moment, what are the implications of that? What are the implications of not needing a map? What are the implications of anything in your experience appearing essentially in the same way, out of nothing? Well, for one thing, it frees up all of your attention. We don't have to navigate our mind with attention. When we see that really any thought about the past is, as Papaji said, a graveyard. I'd say it's not even a graveyard. You can't find it. You can't find the past. You've never found the past. You've never experienced it. So we don't have to be preoccupied with it. Especially here, especially in a situation like this. So we're freed up to fully experience. And that full spectrum of experience includes everything. All sensations, all emotions, all sounds, all forms, movement, stillness, and all of that without those labels. When we free ourselves in this way from the past, the illusion of the past, the illusion of time, often what comes with that is energetic release or energetic shifting or energetic movement. One component of that is thought. This is why we can have a lot of thought in this setting. The beauty of it is that you don't have to manage it. Whatever's happening in this setting, which is not in time, is perfectly managed all on its own. It doesn't need your help. It doesn't need your understanding. It doesn't even really need your willingness. The willingness makes it easier on the person, makes it easier on the apparent person. When we have an experience that's challenging or highly energetic or confusing or anything really, even ecstatic ultimately, in this setting, it's often associated with something that was hidden, only hidden by the dynamism of the mind. Nothing can really be hidden, but the mind's pretty good at doing its level best to keep things hidden. But as we arrive here, not in time, then these dark spaces or these overlooked spaces, neglected spaces, I suppose overlooked is probably the least judgmental or moralistic way of saying it because it's totally innocent. But these overlooked experiences, energies, spaces that may correlate with something physical, like kundalini, movement, pain, restlessness, can have a lot of a mental component, a lot of thoughts. But often one of the best ways to meet the experience, which is just coming into consciousness, coming into light from wherever it's been hidden wherever it was cast off into, the best way to meet it is at the level of emotion. In small group today, Kogan, who's a Zen Buddhist, has been a Zen monk for many years, pointed out that Buddhism is really good at some things and pretty darn not good at other things. The one thing I think it kind of sorely lacks in most or maybe all of the different sects of Buddhism is emotion work, or even acknowledgement of the importance of emotion work. I'm sure there are definitely exceptions. Like there are teachers here and there who know this and who are deeply realized and can incorporate that in their teaching. But by and large, the doctrinal aspect of Buddhism overlooks it. But emotion is rather human, rather normal, rather natural. The repression of emotion happens, or suppression of emotion happens almost automatically with essentially everyone to some degree. So we will all face this issue, this concern of repressed emotion or suppressed emotion. Sometimes we don't even know that's happened. With my experience early in life was I didn't even realize what emotion was really. I mean, I think I knew intellectually and I could feel some emotion, but it was such a frozen space in me. The energetics of it was so like kind of frozen and repressed that it took me a long time to start to even feel what was coming up and even recognizing what emotion that was being felt at the moment. And often with that experience, if there's a lot of repression, when we start to touch into it, it's often very murky. It's murky in the mind because the mind doesn't really know what to do with it. But it's also murky as far as, it's like when you open this, to make an analogy, when you open the space or open the door to this space, there's a lot in there that wants to come out. It's like, everything wants to come out at once, sort of. Maybe it's something like that. So you sometimes are confused about what you're even feeling. You can be feeling complex emotions, more than one emotion at once. And then a lot of it is laden with resistance, which distorts all of it. And resistance is hard to see as such. You usually sense it more than see it or find it overtly. But when there's a lot of resistance in the system, it just gets very confusing and it shoots us up into our head a lot. Can change the quality of thoughts to something that we would maybe call more dark or more self-defeating and so forth. But this is why I often start with an exploration of consciousness and recommend people investigate their identity in a very direct or one-pointed way. Because with that realization of the sort of infinite nature of consciousness, it makes this part a whole lot easier. You can still have intense thoughts. In fact, you'll have some of the darkest thoughts after awakening, but at that point, you can handle them in the sense that you never really believe thoughts like you used to. And over time, the consciousness becomes more and more and more settled to where, as I mentioned in guided meditation this morning, you don't really have a strong idea about this thought being really difficult and this thought being okay and this thought being preferable. It's really just thought. It all kind of has the same texture, so that the content of thought you just lose interest in largely. So that's why I recommend that first usually. But as we talk about quite often, after a shift or just with intentional investigation, you will come into contact with a lot of emotional material. And again, by that time, hopefully the consciousness aspect, the thoughts that come and stir up the mind, you have some tools and you have some insight to not get too distracted by that and just, open up to asking yourself, what am I really feeling? What's being felt? I think one of the most direct ways that does come is with Kundalini. with energetics, like very intense energetics. I've had some myself. I haven't had the really intense versions. I know other people have. I've heard of several, but I've definitely had it, and I've found that there is usually an emotion associated with it, and there's almost always resistance associated with it. It's almost like, this is again just making an analogy, but it's almost like when the energetics of awakening get going, if there's enough resistance in the system, it can just like punch through. It can just almost like break open channels, and that's why it can be so intense and can be really disturbing if you've never had it. So when people start experiencing energetics for the first time, if it's very intense Kundalini type stuff, it can just kind of happen all night long. You don't get to sleep very much, and it happens at random times, and can be distracting, and you get very tired, and then the whole time you're trying to figure out what to do about it, how to manage it, how to work with it, and all. So, but I do find that there's almost always resistance associated with it initially. It may be the most direct way that the awakening process shows you how to work with resistance, work through resistance. But I think the most important aspect of that is just being open to the possibility that there is resistance in the system. This is probably the most valuable question that I can ask myself, or I would ask someone else in deeper stages of realization, is, can you find resistance in the system right now? And it can be with a perception, it can be with something, a worldview that someone's having or holding. It can be with an intense emotional experience. It can be with energetics. But it's a really valuable thing to learn to investigate in yourself. Is there resistance here somewhere to this experience? Just asking, could there be? Maybe you can't find it. You can't always find it. Resistance hides. It's not obvious always. Especially when we're identifying with thoughts, then it's just completely hidden. But as we disidentify from thoughts, it becomes more obvious, at least its effects do. So just asking the question, is there resistance in the system somewhere? Am I resisting this experience at some level? Am I resisting this experience at an intellectual level or an energetic level? Just asking the question and being open to where that question could lead the experience, or trusting that just putting the question into the system or out there is valuable, is enough often. You don't have to analyze. You may not get an answer in the way you want it in that moment, but it's very helpful to learn to dial into what resistance actually feels like. And we're not trying to eliminate resistance. I'll say that at the outset. That doesn't work. Resisting resistance creates a lot of struggle. Like thoughts, you don't resist. It's not helpful generally to resist thoughts, almost ever, I would say. So asking the question, am I experiencing resistance? Is it in the system somewhere? If you are prone to a lot of self-defeating thought or belief, this can lead you to a kind of spiral of self-doubt almost. But remember, it's not an intellectual question. And number one. And number two, this is totally innocent. Incorporating resistance into your experience on a daily basis is not something you chose to do. It's not something you were taught to do overtly. It's something that probably happens automatically, the way our nervous systems are structured. And then we also do reinforce it. We learn to reinforce it through various means from people who sometimes love us and other times from people who are traumatize us. But we learn to incorporate resistance, and we also learn to hide that from ourselves. So yeah, if asking a question like, is there resistance in the system? That's why I like to ask it in a non-personal way. Not like, am I resisting something? It's a little less personal to say, is there resistance here? But yeah, if that leads you to like a lot of shame or a lot of headiness about what you've done wrong or your past or something, just remind yourself it's totally innocent. It's just something that's appearing, the resistance. that we're investigating. Yeah, and when maybe the most basic inquiries that are valuable around emotion that I can think of, at least in the moment, would be two simple questions. What am I feeling? And is there any resistance? You may say, what am I feeling? I don't know, there's definitely emotion here, but I'm not sure what it is. It's like frustration, some grief maybe, sadness, maybe a little anger. You might just kind of explore and find this cascade of emotions. When you touch into one, you feel what's underneath it, and then underneath it. Sometimes it's very subtle too. Other times, if you just stop and go, wait a minute, what's going on? Oh my God, I'm feeling major frustration right now. Just acknowledging frustration can be really helpful. I would say 80% of the questions I get in these contexts have some degree of frustration built into the question. Maybe very subtle, but yeah, a lot of frustration. But just acknowledging it. Okay, I'm feeling frustration. Now, is there resistance to that? You could also ask it in a different way if resistance is too abstract. You could ask, am I introducing any resistance? Or you could say, is there a part of me that doesn't want this here? That doesn't want this experience? Is there something here that doesn't want this experience? Or that thinks it's not okay? Just feel in. You may get an intellectual answer, like yes. And it may be revealing too. Intellectual answers aren't always to be discarded. You may get an intellectual answer, oh my gosh, my mother always saw the world this way, and I incorporated that without knowing it. It could be something like that, which can be really helpful. But often it's not an intellectual answer, it just brings your attention to the body somewhere. You just find a sort of somatic experience. It could be a contracted space, or it could just be a energetic pattern in the body. It could be, your body might respond, you might feel some movement. And if you do, and you feel inclined, you can get up and move, or lay down and move. Sometimes even moving helps to touch into the resistance. Also helps to soften the resistance, perhaps. So what am I feeling right now? And is there any resistance in the system? As I mentioned, sometimes, often there's a degree of sort of frustration or some resistance in the questions I get, but sometimes it's really strong. And on occasion, someone will ask something, and what they're asking me feels like one story, not one story, but one thing that's happening. But what I feel is much stronger, and it's an emotion. And it's something like anger, frustration, anger. And the very obvious implicit in the question or the statement someone's making about their experience, implicit in it is, and it really shouldn't be this way. I'm feeling XYZ and it really shouldn't be this way. They don't say it, but it's implicit in the way the question's asked and so forth. So I sense that. That's not all the time, that's on occasion. But in those moments, it's like my priority feels like, at least in reflection, I suppose, my priority always feels like, how can I get this person to acknowledge that emotion without me pointing it out directly? I mean, I can. Sometimes I have. If it really feels strong and it just keeps coming and the question comes over and over, or I feel like the person's really just walking around and not experiencing it, which we've all done. So it's not because of some kind of personal ignorance. It's just the way this goes sometimes. I'll sometimes ask, do you want me to tell you what I feel or what it looks like could be going on? And on occasion, in a subset of those experiences, I've had times where that person just touching into what the emotion actually was is a huge release, like a true shift. That's how our nervous systems are set up, or our mind identified experience. We can be really smart about certain things and really precise and really knowledgeable and really open to discovery and know a lot about ourselves. But sometimes that one emotion is just the one emotion we don't want to feel, and it just hides in the back and we don't realize it, So that's why asking these questions can be helpful of yourself. You can, of course, do it relationally, with a therapist or a friend you trust or someone. Just, I'm feeling something, I'm not sure what it is. Or just tell the story and they may just say, oh, it sounds like you're really mad, or you're really, really feeling a lot of grief. Could be there too. So yeah, asking for help, of course, can be valuable in these settings as well. Also writing, trying to write out your experience with as much clarity as you can. I love what Adyashanti said. He said at one point he would write and he wouldn't move the pen until he knew that what he was going to write was true, like really true. And then he would wait. And I think that's a really good approach. You can just do that with your own experience. Just clarifying your experience into words sometimes really reveals what you didn't see.